There's a famous word from Rabbi Shlomo Salanter, who was the leading Torah sage in his generation, who was the founder of the Mussar movement. Mussar means how a person has to conduct himself at every level, ethical, moral, how he has to live his life with an order, meticulously, correctly. She used to say there's a term masmid. What's a masmid? A person who does everything with vigilance. He says, what's a masmid? It's not a person who studies 20 hours a day. He used to say, a person who sleeps in time, eats in time, does everything in time, and learns in time. That's a vigilant person, living as a responsible human being. That's what God expects you to be. So the Rambam writes over here, Talmud Chochem mechalkel dvar b'mishpat. All aspects of a Talmud Chocham's life, it's evaluated weighed within the context of equity, justice. What does that mean? Ochel v'shoseh v'zon his beso kfi mamona v'aslachoso. He feeds his family and supports them himself, eating, drinking wise, based on his capacity, his financial capacity, and his level of success. He doesn't overspend. We're speaking about within need. He doesn't distract himself, burden himself more than is necessary. You have to support a family, that's called necessary. You have to put yourself out and take every initiative to be able to support them. But beyond that, something that goes beyond necessity, he does not. Talmud Chacham. It's interesting. There's a concept which the Ramchal, Rabbi Lutzato, writes about in the Path of the Just. Although the Gemara tells us in two locations that one's yearly stipend regarding his financial situation is set from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, nevertheless, we have to take initiative. Unless we take initiative, that stipend is not released. He says, why? Because when Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, and he was cursed, mankind was cursed, you'll eat bread by the sweat of your brow. A prerequisite for that allocation to be released is you have to meet the criteria by sweat of your brow. And that's the whole concept of Hishtadlus, taking initiative. Before Hashem releases that pre-allocated stipend, you have to take initiative. Now the question is, what's initiative? By the sweat of your brow. That's the degree of initiative. What about a person who goes beyond that? Beyond that, it's not necessary. Because you've done sufficiently. I'll give you an example. There's something that a seller is selling. And another person wants to buy the same item, and there are 100 of such items to be sold. Do you have to get into a bidding war to buy that item? If the other person buys the first item, there are another 99 that you could buy. There's no reason to pay more than the asking price. Person says, well, I want to pay more. No, that's called exercise in futility. That's just a waste. So a person, the Talmud Chacham, he does not take initiative more than it's necessary. Because he understands that whatever is meant to be his is going to be his. However, he has to take initiative, which is the prerequisite to receive what's meant to be his. But to go and take an effort more than is necessary, that's an act of futility. It's unnecessary. Because you just have to meet that prerequisite. Once you've met that prerequisite, doing more than that is unnecessary. You have to see people waiting for an elevator. They hit the button, then they hit the button about 6 more times before the elevator comes. You realize once you touch that button more than once, it's not necessary to touch it more than the first time. It's not come any quicker. But people, that's what they do. Why? What are you doing it? It's just futile. It's futility. Same thing. People, they become frantic in what they want, and they lose the whole idea of what's rational behavior. The Talmud Chacham, knowing exactly what's rightfully is and how to bring that about, he doesn't go beyond that point. Therefore, he does not take initiative more than he has to take initiative. The Chachomim, and it's based on verses in the Torah, they commanded us, or they instructed us, you should only eat meat if you desire it. If you desire to eat meat, satisfy that desire. Because if a person's craving, it's important to satisfy the craving. But if you're not craving for meat, there's no reason to eat meat. A person who's healthy is important. Healthy, it's not important. It's not necessary to eat meat more than once a week. Every Shabbos. During the week, it's not necessary. If it's a health issue, it's a different story. Let's say he's a wealthy man. It's worthwhile since there's a certain health benefit to it. One should eat it every day. But it's costly. But otherwise, unless it's necessary, once a week you eat it on Shabbos, because that's only Shabbos. A person should always spend on his food less than he needs, because you're not supposed to eat firstly till you're full, and also if you could subsist on quality B, you don't need quality A. You buy a fish. Let's say white fish is as good as another type of fish, which is more expensive. So if you're eating it for health reasons, there's no reason to buy the more expensive fish. So you should always, even though you can afford the other fish or the other item, you always should spend less. But when you dress, your attire should be what you could afford. But when it comes to accommodating your wife and children, even more than what you're worthy. I'll give you an example. A person himself earns a mediocre income. So therefore, you should dress the way a person who earns that kind of income. That's your attire should be that. What about your children and wife? You spend even more than that they should feel that they're more than mediocre. They're more than that. Again, why? It's a known fact that men are greater philanthropists than women. It's a known fact, a statistic. What's the reason? Because the man who's usually the breadwinner and he generates the income, psychologically he's secure even if he gives away. A woman who's usually the heir or the recipient of others giving her, so when she gives it away, it causes her to be less secure. Therefore, statistically, maybe if a woman earns her own money and she is an earner, that's something else. But at one time, a woman who was a widow who inherited wealth, although she had wealth, unless she had reasons for the IRS to give it away, she didn't give it away as easily. But again, who's the one who's more secure? So the husband who is the breadwinner, he should wear his attire should be based on his financial status. His wife and children, where they're just the recipients, they should feel they're more than he is, because they need that extra little bit to feel more secure. Derech Bali Deo. The way of a person who lives responsibly, person who has understanding. The first thing you have to have set in place, you have to have a livelihood which will support him. That's the first thing you have to have in place. The Mishnah tells us in Kiddushin that a father has an obligation to teach his child, as a child, when he's at that point of maturity, a craft, that he should be able to be financially independent. As a father has an obligation to teach him Torah, he has an obligation to teach him a craft. As the Mishnah tells us, Pirkei Avos saying, Kemach ein Torah. We live in a physical world. If there's no bread, there's no Torah. So the first thing should be in place, should be a livelihood which he's able to support himself. That's the first thing. That's a person who's responsible. He doesn't take on other responsibilities unless he's financially secure. So he has that ability to earn, which will cover his needs. After you have the means to support yourself, you should buy a residence. Residence, that's your location. That's a location which provides security. The first security is financial security, the ability to earn. After you have the ability to earn and you've earned, by the residence. Because again, that's security. That somehow gives you your privacy and your life is not public knowledge. Now that everything's in place, you have the means to support, you have the residence to have your privacy. Now a responsible person marries a woman. Because now you're a provider, you have location, and now you're ready to start the family. Shnemar, as it says in the Pasuk, when the Jews would go to war, and the law enforcers would announce to the soldiers before they go out to the front, who's the person who had planted a vineyard, and he did not yet finish redeeming the various fruits, meaning it was the 4th year after the planting. First 3 years of a vineyard, you're not permitted to benefit from the produce. It's orlo. The 4th year, that crop, a person either takes it to Yerushalayim to eat, or he redeems it. So first the Torah speaks about the one who's the vineyard keeper. Then it speaks about the person who built a house, and he didn't yet move into it. Then it says, a man who married a woman who betrothed her, he didn't consummate the marriage yet. He should not go out to the front. He should first have all those things in place. But the fools, a tipish is a fool. We're not, a person who has limited intelligence, you don't call him a fool. He can't be more. A fool is a person who should know better, and you act and behave, and your decision process is not based on what your capacity is. That's a fool. But the fools, what do? First thing to do is marry a wife. Now, if you are a wife, now, how do you support her? Well, I didn't think about that. Well, we'll make it somehow. And where are you going to live? That you and she should have that privacy of your lives to be able to be protected. He didn't think about that either. Well, that's totally irresponsible. The man's a fool. And afterwards, these people, these fools, if they have the financial means, they'll purchase a residence. Then he's trying to find some kind of craft, some kind of livelihood. Oh, he's punished with that stoko, who become a ward of the charity. Person, worse to worse, I'll take charity. And where's the sense of dignity? If you're able to do it yourself, why are you taking dignity? Where's your dignity? Where's your self-respect? See, these people, the Rambam refers to not as Talmud Chacham. That's about Deios. A person who's intelligent person behaves intelligently. You could have a genius intelligence, but if your behavior is not in sync with that intelligence, then you're a fool. No, it's going head first. That's what you do. Beklolos isha teores. With a person who's cursed, he first marries the wife, builds the house, then he plants the vineyard. Because everything's backwards. Your behavior, your actions are inverted, backwards. Guaranteed you're not going to succeed. When you don't do things in the sequential order, which is responsible, you're not going to succeed. David, in all his ways of his life, he did it with intelligence. And that's why Hashem Imo, that's why God was with him. You take initiative to live responsibly, Hashem will assist you. But if you go and turn it upside down and do it backwards, then already you need special intervention, because that's not the way God created the world. There's an order, there's a sequence in life. As they said, you don't run before you crawl, and you definitely don't walk before you crawl. And if you do, then say you're not going anywhere. And that's the reality of life. It's interesting, as society advanced, we speak about multi-storied structures, residences. At one time, what was a house? First, the house was privately owned. Residence was privately owned. It could have been a one-hut cottage. That's what was. But that's where you lived. And then afterwards, the whole concept of rentals, you would stay in an inn overnight, but on a permanent location to live there, you had to own your house. It wasn't so simple. So a person understood, unless you want to live and be exposed to the elements, you have to earn a living to afford to buy that residence, whatever that residence was. Once you had the residence, then we could talk about having a wife and raising a family. Then all of a sudden, there's multi-structured structures, apartment houses. What do you have? A 3-story building, a 5-story building. You can't have more. Why? Because before you had elevators, people could only walk so many flights. But you realize the population was a smaller population. But as the population grows, you build structures which are 12 stories. Then it was 21 stories. There was a 40-story building. And the landlord, who's worth his while, because he has one investment of building the building, he has multiple income from all the rentals. So it was a constant of rent. So now the person doesn't have to earn as much as he did to buy the residence. He's able to afford the rental. I'm just saying the way Hashem has society evolve. So therefore, people, as long as they knew of that income, they could afford to pay the rent, they were there. That's being responsible. You don't have to be able to earn the house, the amount to purchase a residence. Rental is enough. And then you marry the wife. Now, the Rambam in the laws of Talmud Torah writes that by Sephardic Jews, they call the rabbi Chacham. The Chacham. Unless he's like the chief rabbi, he's only called Chacham. And the Rambam writes that a Chacham, that before he becomes the rabbi of the community, of a congregation, he should be financially independent. And after he's finished financially independent, then he assumes the position of Chacham, to have constituents. You know why? Because a person who is in a leadership position, the people can't dictate his life. You have to dictate to them, or you have to lead them. A leader leads, he's not led. A person is financially in need, automatically have conflicts. You can't be fully objective when it comes to direct people in the direction they should go. So if you're going to be a chacham, meaning to advise them in their lives, spiritually speaking, and even sometimes rein in on them, you have to be financially independent before you assume that position. It's not he earns a salary. He doesn't earn a salary. He's financially independent. If they pay him a salary, the salary is not relevant really to his independent ability to support himself. You don't want to be a ward of the community. A rabbi could be the ward of a congregation because they dictate his life. And because of his conflicts of interest and his levels of insecurity, that's the reason why he makes the decisions and he leads them in that direction. That oni choshev kemes, that a person's impoverished, he's like a dead person. Why is he dead? Why is he like a dead person? Because when a person's at the mercy of charity, as they say in Yiddish, "Ochen vei," woe to that person. That means, nobody who looks at him. You have to come with your hat in your hand. You got to beg to be in a position to beg. So where's your dignity? You've given up all your dignity. Sometimes it's your circumstance. The person has no choice. But to say, well, I'll do it backwards, and worst to worst, I'll be supported from charity, that's definitely not the way to go. Worst to worst, I'll go off the cliff, and I'll end my life. I won't need any financial support. That's not an option. So therefore, you have to be responsible. If you live as an intelligent person, you have to use your intelligence to live responsibly and do it right. You do it step by step, you build. You don't do it backwards. That's what the Rambam is saying over here. But it's interesting. He quotes the verse. It says, regarding a blessing, the David, David, every aspect of his life, he utilizes intelligence. And that's why God was with him. If you invest money with a fund, if the investor is responsible, you give more money to invest. If he's irresponsible, you take back what you've given and you cut your losses. Hashem endows people with intelligence. Intelligence is meant to be used as an intelligent person, not to have the IQ and live unintelligently, to live like a fool, to live your life all because you're inflated with an ego without really only satisfying what your immediate needs are. You want the wife. How are you going to support her? What's your residence? How are you going to protect her? How are you going to raise your family? I never thought of that. Many people who are Orthodox, truly committed to their Orthodoxy, when they move to a community, the first thing they want to know, the synagogue, how far is it from my home, from my residence? If it's within walking distance, I'll move to the community. It's not within walking distance, I don't move to that community. Of course, that means you have no way to attend a shul, to go to be part of a synagogue on Shabbos, because if you're a Sabbath observer, you don't drive. What about Jewish education? How close is the closest Orthodox day school? You don't want to put your son in a car or your daughter that they have to drive an hour each way to go to school. You prefer that it should be closer. All these things are key components in the decision which community you choose. The same idea. Before you go into a community, you don't look at the house. Well, it's a fire sale. But where is it? You're in the boondocks. No, they sell property up in the Appalachia. You can buy 20 acres for a fraction of what it cost on, on Park Avenue. You can buy a whole town. What are you going to do in the Appalachia? Contract some kind of who knows what, some kind of bacteria up in the mountains there. And you go into a cold country and get yourself a black lung. Is that what you're going to do? Because they don't have proper ventilation. People, they have wealth and they squander it. But how do you live so irresponsibly? Why? Because we have people who are very generous, and you live irresponsibly because you always rely on others coming to your help, to your aid, to support you financially. It's not the right way to live. It's forbidden. If God gives you something, we find by Yaakov, he was a very Jacob, our patriarch, was a very wealthy man. He had tremendous wealth after he had fled from his father, after being there 20 years. What happened? He forgot earthenware vessels, and he went back for them. And from there, we learn that as wealthy as you are, you can't be what? You can't be wasteful. Even with something as inexpensive as earthenware vessels. So if you have, and you squander it, because he said, worst to worst, we have a very generous charity. And if my financial situation, I'm able to meet the criteria they'll give me, so I'll live irresponsibly. It's forbidden. If God gives you something, you're a caretaker. You're a custodian. Just as your health, you're a custodian, you have to maintain your health. When God gives you means and assets, you have to live responsibly. Or a person, he wants to give away all his wealth, he wants to consecrate it. And at whose expense? You consecrate everything, that means you become a burden on the community. You have no right to do it. Person you live in an agricultural society. You have a field which continuously produces income, and you want to buy a house. It's not the right thing to do. Because profit-wise, in an agricultural society, if you know how to generate income from the field generates more income than the house. You shouldn't, if you have a house and you want to sell the house and buy movables, because a house is something which is what? Which is permanent. It has a permanence. Movables are fungible. They could be stolen, whatever. A person takes a mortgage on his house because he needs working capital, and he takes where actually if he doesn't pay that the loan, he's going to be dispossessed. You shouldn't do that. You're putting yourself in jeopardy because the house you're secure. Once you put that security in jeopardy, you may not have a house. You'll be on the street. But you sell movables and you buy a field because the field ongoingly produces. What is the principle, the rule of thumb? The perspective should be that you should always succeed with your assets, with what you have. And to continuously exchange something that's fungible or something that doesn't have that staying power to something which is more permanent. So movables are less permanent than a field. But movables, you could generate more income maybe at this moment. But once that income's there, that income, you could lose that income. But the house or the field, which has innately the ability to continuously to produce, that's an ongoing producer. Now, there's an expression, you don't want to kill the hen that lays the golden egg. You don't want that. People have relationships, and those relationships are very valuable in terms of your livelihood and many things. And they abuse the relationship without really thinking. And if you abuse it, what are you doing? You're killing the hen that is laying that golden egg. That's what you're doing. It's the same idea. I always say, the name of Rishon Salanter, the Code of Laws, there are 4 volumes, 4 sections. The 4 chalokim to Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Yisrael says the 5th section was never committed to writing. It's called common sense. You have seichel, you have the 4. You have no seichel, you have no common sense, you lose it all. And that's what we're talking about. What is the rule of thumb in life? It's to be secure. Secure means fixed producing income. So if you have a field to buy a house, it's not the right thing. Because that is your gold, that's the hen that's laying is producing the profits. You have the house, it's not producing profits, you may have a beautiful home. What are you going to do if you can't make ends meet? You got to mortgage it. What happens? You take a mortgage on the house for working capital, and you took too much because you were counting on certain things. And then the market goes south, and you can't pay the mortgage. What happens to your house? You're dispossessed. So you have to always have a backup plan when you make decisions, exactly where you're going. And that's why that's whole concept of Ezol Chocham Arosa Nolad. What is the wise man? He always sees the ramifications of his decisions. What are the consequences? V'osiakav lehonos ma'at lefisho lehonos ma'at v'yavsev harbe. There's an expression, penny wise, pound foolish. Person says, well, I'll make this decision once. He says, you may benefit a little, but the loss is not worth it. When you put yourself in a position where you're precarious, well, I hope the market goes up. You can open today to tomorrow. You still have to live responsibly. You hire a person, he tells you what he's able to do and what kind of profits he's going to make. But he's going to take risks, which the owner of the company says, something, this company doesn't take those kinds of risks. And that's why we've been in business for the past 50 years. Because if we had employees taking those kinds of risks, we wouldn't be here today. Same idea. For the momentary benefit, that shouldn't be the basis for your decision. Because ultimately, the loss is going to far outweigh whatever that gain may be. Right now, he was speaking about not a Talmud Chochem, anybody who is intelligent. This is the intelligent way to live. Now, what about when you do business and you engage in a negotiation? What's the level of integrity? What's the manner of behavior? An ordinary person can behave one way, as long as he's within the law. Because behaving anything less than that doesn't reflect something not good. But a Talmud Chochem, and we'll discuss this why, Maso Matono, Shel Talmud Chochem be'emes u'benuna, be'emuna. A Talmud Chochem, his interaction and relationships, whether it's business, whether it's in any level of relationship, it's with truth and with faith. There's an expression in Yiddish. I'm not sure if maybe Larry is aware of it. He's a schwitzer. You ever hear that expression? Meaning, he's always putting in the amount of effort like he's making his first dollar. You understand? Take it slow. It's not only your effort that will allow you to succeed. God has some part of the equation. There are other people who exist besides yourself. It's not only you, there are others. And if you take in all those variables into the equation, it's not like you're earning your first dollar. First, they have to be truthful. You don't have that conflict of interest, and therefore you see things through your colored lenses because you're first and foremost. That's firstly. That's emes. Emunah is you're faithful. Your word's your word, and you're seen as a person of integrity. Truthful means you have to be truthful. Emunah means you're recognized as a person of integrity. You carry out what you say, you do. Why a Talmud Chochem? Very often we read in the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, it reached a point where the people, the Jews, they were very difficult. And he says to Hashem, either help me out on this one or take me out of here. So Hashem says, take 70 elders and you go into the communion tent and I will pass the spirit from yourself onto them and they will assist you in dealing with the people. These were the 70 elders, but there was a problem. But if you have 70, you have 12 tribes. So what did he do? He took 70 pieces of parchment, small pieces, and he wrote on it, Zoking, elder. Two of them were left blank. And then they were going to draw lots. If you drew the lot and it said Zoking on it, that means you were eligible to be one of the 70 to go into communion tent, that the spirit of Moshe, of prophecy, should pass on to them. The one who pulled out that blank piece of parchment, that means he wasn't one. So Rashi cites the words of Chazal, that the two that pulled out, the ones that were blank, what did he say to them? God's not interested in you. You got it? I mean, the persona was elder. Also, they have a rude awakening. All the other 70, they make the grade. Outwardly, they look the same and they believe who they are. What is Hashem saying? God doesn't want you. It's a real slap in the face. It's like getting a cold bucket of water poured over your head. All of a sudden, you get a wake-up call. It's not what I thought. A person who's a Talmid Chacham and he doesn't behave with truth and with integrity, he should really introspect and understand who he's not. He may think he is, but he's not. Because you are who you are supposed to be, and everything is rooted and emanates from your Torah knowledge, you should have the faith and the trust and the proper behavior. And if you don't, it means you're not who you think you are. And that's the litmus test. That's why a person, Talmid Chacham, he could look away. It's okay. He's not going to turn the world upside down for the sake of getting his way. Unless it's for the betterment of the community. He will not do it. Where do I have a right to impose myself on anyone? That's the Talmid Chacham. Doesn't impose himself on anyone if it's in a position. Other person says, look, I'm in need, I have a right. Well, why do you have a right? Because if you have a need, automatically that makes it right, but that doesn't make it right. And we're not talking about where it's a question of a person starving to death, where it's life and death situation. We're not talking about that. Many years ago, people come and they raise money because they're not financially in a good place. So I said, what happened? He says, well, he was earning an ordinary income, working for someone, and he borrowed money because he wanted to build his own business. And today he's in debt for $5 million. So because you wanted to be in your ivory tower and be this wealthy man, and you didn't succeed, and now you want to take your debt, $5 million, and put it on everyone else? Something, I think I could give my money somewhere else where it could go a lot farther and people live more responsibly. Why did you want to become a wealthy man? Because I thought I would. But you take all the risk factors into account. Who's going to pick up the tab if you don't succeed? Well, I'll go to the community. Something? That's not the way to begin. Well, I never thought. Why would you think? It's a reality. Who advised you? Your ego didn't allow you to see that there is this chance that you may fail. And didn't allow you to realize that you're going to be a burden on the community. And you're going to actually deplete the community from funds which they needed maybe elsewhere, which are more important than you becoming a wealthy man. So a person who's a Talmid Chacham, he takes all these things into account in a very serious manner. And if he doesn't, he's not a Talmid Chacham. But he's a walking encyclopedia. A walking encyclopedia doesn't make you a Talmid Chacham. A Talmid Chacham is a person, as it says, it's Tochu Gebaru. That means you're fully integrated with your Torah knowledge. What you see, that's who you are. It's not what I see, but all of a sudden you want to be something else. You had the privilege of seeing Gedolei Yisrael, Torah sages, world-renowned Torah sages, and you saw the way they behaved and the way they spoke. Literally, their behavior was princely. But you understand, you have to yourself be a little bit of a Talmid Chacham to understand it's not meekness. It's not because they didn't have a backbone. Nothing to do with that. These people had plenty of backbones. They were very strong. They were strong and unshakable if they had to be. When it came to other things, they were very giving, very soft, and very compassionate, very understanding. But you have to yourself be a little bit of a maven to understand and appreciate who they were. An ordinary guy say, look, the rabbi, what does he look? The man, he speaks in a whisper. The man's afraid of his own shadow. That's the way that person evaluates it. But if you understand who the person is, because then you understand it's part of the profile. Of course, if this man has to become a lion, he's a lion. It's the same idea. So he deals with honesty, integrity. He could have had the deal. Let's just with a story. the Glicks, they once put down a down payment on a certain piece of property. And for whatever reason, after they put it down, they did some more due diligence, and they realized it wasn't worth it. And they would lose the deposit. We're talking about a very significant amount of money. It could have been a few $1 million. And there was another real estate tycoon. He says to them, I'll teach you exactly how to get your money back. You don't have to lose $1 on it. And the other man was, I'm not going to say whether he was observant, not observant. He definitely was minimally traditional. So they said, I understand, but it's worth losing the money, that there shouldn't be any negative reflection on who we are as Jews. That's what he said. We'll lose a few $1 million. Doesn't make a difference. You have the other person, he says, I've worked away many times with this kind of deal without taking a loss. They didn't say anything. What you do is you do. We have to behave as we see is appropriate. That's emes v'emunah. You deal with truth and with integrity. Your word's your word. You made that level of commitment, regardless of the consequence. You bite the bullet and walk away. And that's Talmud Chochem. I'll tell you a story